Good evening. This is Stedman Fry, along with my co-host Amanda Goodman-Berry and Flex McGee, with Delta Workers Unite, the Working Class Podcast, your newest resource for news, updates, and information on the State of the Union drive and how you can get involved. We'll bring you interviews and stories from workers just like you and us who want to share happenings as they see them. We'll also be debunking the falsehoods and misconceptions about the union and giving you the tools to do the same. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you will know when we post or go live. Thank you. Hello. Good evening. This is Stedman Fry here with Delta Workers Unite, the Working Class Podcast, and we're back for part 2 of the show we did last week, or not last week, 2 weeks ago, talking about raises, the economy, and the impact on all us workers. So we have, in order to kind of accommodate schedules, things have changed with the bid and everything. We have a pre-recorded show today. So we're joined again by Brother Earl, Brother Kip, Amanda, and myself. Flex was not able to make it on the second part, but to continue the conversation about having a union and how it secures your pay, how it manages, or how it helps you to manage and navigate even during tough economic situations like we may be looking at or like is being forecasted for us right now. Let's see, we got one comment so far. Evening, brothers and sisters. Evening, good evening, good evening. And so as I do, did I have my mic? I hope I didn't have my mic muted this whole time. But if I did, I don't want to go and repeat everything. But we'll begin the show now with the pre-record.
To the Delta Workers Unite, the Working Class Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Goodman-Berry, along with my co-host, Stedman Fry and Flex McGee. Today, we will be talking about, once again, part 2 of how does Delta get a raise? And we will also be adding to it the stock buyback. So without any further ado, let's jump right in because we got a lot to cover and we got a lot of exciting stuff coming for you. So will you introduce yourself again, Earl and Kip? Could you tell us who you are, what you've done, and where you're from?
My name is Earl Hunt. Stationed out of Philadelphia. 28 years with Delta Airlines on the ramp.
Kip Hedges in Minneapolis, MSP, 28 years on the ramp, retired now, but still involved in the fight to get a union for every Delta worker.
All right, and Stedman.
Yep, Stedman Fry, Detroit ramp, 18 years.
All right, all right. So I do have a couple questions for you guys, but I think it's important that we jump right into what is happening currently and what has happened since we done the last podcast. Let's jump right in and talk about the Delta stock buyback and the raise. And Kip, I would like for you to head us off with that. And Earl, when you're ready to jump in, you can. But can you kind of break it down to the Delta workers and people out there who don't truly understand what Delta just did with the stock buyback and the raise?
So it's pretty funny because 2 weeks ago, me and Earl were on here and we were talking about the process that United and Delta, or unionized carrier and a non-union carrier, use to determine raises, the deeply democratic nature of how a union carrier goes, and how the undemocratic nature of how a non-union carrier determines raises. And in the so 2 weeks later, it is really clear what Delta thinks of its workers. And I'll start by explaining that, well, everybody knows 4% raise, and inflation is 2.5%, something like that right now. So you actually got about a 1.5% raise because inflation has eaten that up. And once the tariffs hit, I think, and your profit sharing check is all gone, and you're starting to get that 4%. I think life is going to get a lot rougher for a lot of Delta workers. So the day after the raise is announced, Delta says we're taking $1 billion and we're buying stock back from shareholders with that. Now, what that means is they're using $1 billion worth of cash to drive up the stock price because that takes a lot of stock off the market, right? And when there's less stock, it means that the price of the stock that exists is going to go higher. So immediately, big hedge funds and brokerage investment houses like BlackRock. I mean, lots of people have heard of BlackRock investment. They get a huge windfall of money because their stock price goes way up, or it's worth more. In the same way with the top executives like Ed Bastian, Glenn Hohenstein, etc., they own a lot of stock. Ed Bastian, all by himself, increased his net worth by $3 million from one day to the next. And I will tell you that that's definitely more than a 4% raise for old Eddie. So even if you, and then shortly thereafter, the Delta management announces that they're going to buy 15% of WestJet stock, which is Canadian carrier, for $330 million. So clearly, even though they told Delta workers that, oh, we can't give you 5% this year, it's got to be 4% because we're heading into turbulent times, those times were not so turbulent that they couldn't give themselves a massive raise in income through a stock buyback and then take $330 million worth of cash and buy 15% of WestJet. So they were simply waiting to give the raise. And then once that was done, then they would go and they would satisfy their investors, right? I mean, that's essentially what happened. So even if you say, well, I'm not that upset because the raise is still okay, it's better than nothing. Okay, I'll even give you that point of view. But at this point, if you think that Delta has anything else in mind as a top priority other than their own executives, their own top executives, and the big investment firms on Wall Street, you're smoking some really good stuff. That's all I got to say. So you have to realize that they are not looking out for your best interests. So how you must do something to protect your interests. And there's only one way to do that, because one person by themselves goes up against Delta and you get nothing. You get exactly what you just got. And with the union, you have thousands, literally thousands. And if you're talking about the flight attendants getting a union, the ramp tower cargo getting a union, and then the pilots having a union, all sticking together to support each other, that's power. That's enough power to make sure that Delta has to respond to us in a respectful way. Because what they've done over the last week shows total and utter disrespect of the workforce. And like I said, I'm retired. I'm not even working there on the ramp anymore. And I'm mad. I'm mad about it because it shows so much disrespect. And there's one way to get to respect, and that's having a union. So I guess I'll stop there. Earl, chime in, and then we can take on some of the questions.
So, Earl, right before you chime in, I just want to make sure that the Delta workers and the flying public, all these people who are listening to this podcast today, that Delta waited to give us a raise of 4% and then decided to go and buy 33 millions plus dollars to invest in WestJet. Is that what you're saying, Kip?
That's exactly what I just said. And let me just say one more thing, which I forgot, which is if you took that $1 billion from the stock buyback, you could give every Delta worker, not just ramp cargo and tower or flight attendants, every Delta worker $11,000, which is $5.50 an hour raise for a full timer. And so, maybe you don't have to give $5.50 raise. Just put Delta workers at the top as far as the pay scale goes. That jump over American, and United will soon have a settled contract, and they will jump over American. So jump a little, Delta, jump a little farther than American, so that Delta workers who make all the profits for the most profitable airline in the world will have an industry leading contract, industry leading wages, benefits, and work rules. So I will stop there.
Okay, Earl, please jump right in. And Stedman, I'll get to you right after Earl.
Kip, you nailed it again. Everything you was about to say, I was about to say also. One thing to mention, even with that stock with WestJet, there's also a stipulation after the government approval is done that Delta will be allowed, out of that 15% shares that they have bought, they will be allowed to sell 2.3% of stock to Air France and KLM, which everybody knows that's part of the SkyTeam Alliance, which that equals out to almost $50 million. So every angle of this, Delta's coming ahead financially, and it just proves and shows that as far as with the work group for Delta, that is non-union, the respect is not there. It's just definitely not there. I remember the times, like I said, when I was Northwest, we went through concessionary period during bankruptcy. That was during 9/11, and that was during the Great Recession. We went through the bankruptcy process. We actually had to negotiate, the company had to negotiate with the union on a concessionary contract where we had to give wages back. Work rules, which equals out to money, we had to give back. Our benefits got scaled back. And that all equaled out to money, which in the contract, we knew what we was getting. Even though we took massive cuts, it was for the survival of the company, which they are standing for today. And it was a valid, legal binding contract. The company cannot go back on it. Even though we gave money concessions, that means money going back to the company so the company can survive. That contract was legal binding. Company cannot go back. So it just proves to you, when we got the raise, the company said, 4%, because economic times, uncertain times with the economy. But now, all the investments that they're making, all the capital that they're investing, which, could have went to the employee, that just proves to you that contracts with unions, with the airlines, need to be implemented with Delta. Because the company will say one thing and they'll definitely act on something different.
Okay, Stedman, go ahead. Thank you, Earl. Thank you, Earl. That was very educational. Thank you. I didn't even know that. Go ahead, Stedman.
Yeah, so the number Kip broke down with the approximately $11,000 per employee and about $5 and change raise for topped out employees. That's more than 10%, right? So prior to the 4% raise we got, American was making 9% more than we were. And so, we're one number that I threw out that I thought, anything less would be a slap in the face. And this was, I think the raise was announced the day after we posted the show. I said anything less than 10%. And I just factored that based on, the Fed wants 2% inflation year on year. Most businesses, they want 2% growth year on year. And so when you look at the amount of raises that we've had as employees in that span of time, if our raises aren't keeping up with inflation, then you're not really making a real gain in like real money. You're losing money. It's kind of hard to understand because you're still getting more money, but in terms of real spending power, you're losing money. And so I said, well, at least 10%, right? Not factoring in the double-digit inflation in 2022, and Kip was saying, the potential that these tariffs have to increase the price of goods and services and products long-term, stuff we haven't seen yet, but the cost of energy, the cost of food that we know has already happened. And so you didn't even do as good of a raise as previous, right? We got 5% before, and now you've only given us 4%. And so, as Earl said, this is an indication of how they really feel and how they really value our effort, our input. We do all we can. We talked about on episode 6, Delta workers showing up big during winter weather, right? Delta workers doing whatever it takes around the industry, around the system to pick up the slack, to make sure that the company is profitable, that it functions well, right? We go around, we fly around, whatever it takes. And this is our repayment for it. This is how we're rewarded, right? We all come to work and do our jobs, but this is the thanks we get for that. More work, less pay, less spending power. And, hey, the company, Ed Bastian, the board, everybody else, they're taken care of. They're able to game the system in some kind of way and finagle the numbers, buying their own stock back. And when you get into the whole Wall Street thing, that's really a mess that could be multiple episodes of this podcast if we were ever to do something like that. But that's what our reward is, right? Without a contract like our CEO has, or any members of our board, even though they try to say they don't have contracts, they have contracts. They have a contractual obligation. The company and the board members have contractual obligations that they fulfill, and they're rewarded and compensated for it. And that's what we deserve. When we meet these metrics, when we get these rewards and awards, we deserve to be compensated, not with a pat on the back, not as Flex said on a previous show, I believe it was episode 17, with food trucks, or 18, with food trucks and DJs and stuff like this, hiring rappers or something, but with real tangible benefits, right? This is not too much to ask. And I'll stop there.
All right. Well, give everybody
got to be worth something, right?
Go ahead, Kip.
Oh, millions of dollars a year.
What'd you say, Kip?
I said, Tom Brady's got to be worth something. They're giving him how many millions of dollars a year to represent?
Yeah. Well, I know I think the contract I heard was like $300 million. And don't get me wrong, I'm a Michigan fan. I like Tom Brady, but hey, that's, I don't like that, right? That money could be used more intelligently and smartly for the people who make Delta work, not for some brand ambassador, not for some leadership, whoever, whatever, but for the people on the ground who make Delta what it is.
Okay, so thank you guys for all of that, and that is beautiful. But I want to go back, jump back to something that we didn't get to in the last podcast that I think is very important. And I'm going to start with you on this one, Kip, again, and then Earl, I'm going to come over to you. I want you to explain that. How does Delta workers and the United workers get a raise? I think that is very important to let the workers understand the difference between how United get a raise and how Delta get a raise. Kip, can you explain that?
Yeah. So it starts off with all the United ramp tower and cargo workers voting on contract proposal convention delegates. So these are delegates elected from all over the system that go to Chicago or wherever. They meet for 4 or 5 days. And at the end of it, they come up with their top demands all the way down to the lesser ones. And they also have a discussion about what a reasonable wage increase would look like based on what the economy looks like, based on what United economics look like, based on what's happening in the industry. Like Americans making whatever, I think it's 39 something an hour right now. So we definitely want to go over that. Absolutely. So those workers get together, they discuss all that, they vote on what their priorities are, and then they elect negotiators from all over the system. Once again, small stations, big stations, hub stations, and those negotiators then take the demands that were brought forth by the convention, and they present it to United. The workers, the union workers, have lawyers, economists, etc., that are at their disposal during negotiations. So, it's not like some dumb old baggage handler is going in there on their own. We have lots of backup, but we also know what the real conditions of work are, what the work rules have to look like, all that kind of stuff. So that combined power goes in, negotiates with the company. If the company behaves badly and says, no, we're not giving you nothing, or however they would phrase it, there's lots of levers that the union has to turn up the heat on the company. They can have rallies, demonstrations, informational picket lines, something like what we used to do back in the old days. We had FOD walks. You know what the FOD, foreign object debris. We would line up on the zipper line and then walk out 50 feet, collect all the zippers and other crap that's on the ramp, then walk back, and then the union steward would give the signal, okay, it's all over. And that would scare the hell out of the company, because if the workers are organized enough to do that, then they're organized enough to do potentially something more escalatory. And finally, the contract is presented to the workers for a vote. So all of us, all the workers, get to vote the contract up or down. And as you saw at Boeing, the Boeing workers voted the first two contracts down. They said, nope, not good enough. Go back and get more. And they got an industry leading kick-ass contract as a result of their solidarity altogether and the solidarity of the labor movement. Lots of other unions and workers stuck behind them because it was a big deal, kind of like what you saw with the UAW, which electrified workers all over the country to see the auto workers standing up for themselves and getting industry leading contracts. So that's the kind of power that's at your disposal as a union worker, and the democratic process that you go through to get to a contract that you like. Delta, on the other hand, they come and they say 4%. What are you going to do? That's it. Sorry. End of story. Done. Those decisions about how much of a raise to give workers get determined in the boardrooms on Wall Street, and also in headquarters in Atlanta. And never does a worker have a thing to say about what that raise is going to look like, because right now you're like little fingers waving in the wind, whereas the union workers are like a fist that can potentially strike back. So that's the difference.
Wow, that's good. Stedman, that deserves a hand. That was good. That was good. That was good. So Earl, I want to jump right into you, but I want to say something that you said, a comment that you made. You said it always seemed like when it comes to our raises, we're always in a holding pattern, which leads me to a question that I wanted to ask you on the last podcast, and it's a two-part question. Who determines the timing of when we get a raise, and why is Delta not the leading industry when it comes to a pay raise?
Why we're not the leading industry as far as pay is because of corporate. Because like what we just went through with the 4% raise, they're going to look at the economics going on in the country. Since all the economy now is somewhat going to the wayside, you have senior leadership, which doesn't have the voice for the work group, make a determination of what the percentage can be. So that's where that comes from, because the way I look at it over the last 15 years, if you look at all the raises that we have went through, from my eyesight, it has never been competitive with United or American. So that's structured from corporate for whatever reason that they're doing it. A lot of it, from my eyesight, for what I read, is the economics in the country. That's what they base it on. And the first question was, I'm sorry, man, what was the first one again?
The first question was, who determines the timing and how much of a raise we get? And I think Kip had an answer for that one, but it combined into what you were saying. Why are we not the leading industry? So Kip may be able to bring that part together, and you come back in on why we're not the leading industry. So I'll let Kip answer that one, and then you come back in, and please let the workers know why we're not the leading industry. So Kip, who determines the timing and how much of a raise we get.
Delta, the executive board of Delta Airlines, in consultation with the largest stockholders who tell Delta, no, that what you're suggesting is either acceptable or not acceptable. And then Ed Bastian says, okay, because you hold leverage over us, that's what we're going to do. So they answer to Wall Street. They do not answer to us. And that's the reason why we got to have a union, so that at least on some level they are answering to us.
And that's one of the reasons why we need a voice at the table. Because I remember my time when right before negotiations came about, you know how Delta gives out these surveys, how good are we treating you? What can we do to improve? In 15 years of the merger, I haven't seen nothing done in my station, and that's just facts. I haven't seen anything done. Prior to the merger, when it was Northwest, I remember clearly, right before negotiations came up, it was actually a survey that the union comes out and gives all to the membership. What would you like to see in negotiations? And it went up to as far as seniority, workroom, your pay, every scope of your job function is in that survey. And once the union collects all that data across the system, then they can start the process of negotiating for a contract. So our voices are valid, our voices are heard in the union environment. Airline world, non-union, we just saw with all the capital investments Delta has done in the last couple of weeks, we don't have a voice. Yet we get 4%, but yet they're able to invest money, millions of dollars into WestJet. They're able to do $1 billion in a buyback, but yet we're getting the 4% raise due to the economy in the country taking a downturn. That's what happens when you have a voice at your job, and like Delta, when you don't have a voice at your job, that's what happens.
That's good, Earl. Thank you for that. And also, Earl, while we're on that, I think this was a question that we had talked about before. Why does union pilots at Delta and Canadian union ground workers at Delta have scheduled pay raises, but the United States workers don't at Delta?
United States ground workers for Delta, because we don't have a union, we don't have a contract. Any union contract within any industry is a legal binding contract. Union contracts can even supersede labor law because it's a binding, legalized contract. So with the ground workers in Canada, unionized, employees have the opportunity to have a voice at the table, negotiate the contract. Same thing with the pilots. Unionized, the pilots have the opportunity to voice or negotiate what they want in their contract. Delta workers, ground workers, US, we don't have a contract. We're not unionized, so we're at-will employees. We're at the disposal of the company. And like I said in the prior shot, I remember clearly Delta completely outsourced the ramp in Philadelphia. This is when I was Northwest. They outsourced the ramp. DGS, which is a subsidiary of Delta, they worked the ramp for 2 years, and then Delta got rid of their own subsidiary company. It had a cleaning vendor work the ramp in Philadelphia for that 11, 12 years until the merger came about. So that proves to show you we are just a cost. We are a cost factor when it comes to this company. The company has no caring for what we do. And even though we produce the amount of profits and revenue for this company, we are just a number. That's it.
Well, thank you, Earl. Statement that deserves a hand clap. Clap on that one, please. That was good. That was good.
Coming.
So I know that we're coming into a pretty good wrap up here. But I want to talk to the workers just for a moment and to really get them to truly understand what has been said here in part two and part one. This all boils down to one thing. Delta doesn't have respect for what we do. Delta does not have the decency to just say these workers have brought us out of COVID. These workers has pushed us beyond COVID. These workers has given us their all. These workers has done everything we have asked of them. They have come into work. They have loaded our planes. They have made sure that the plane goes out on time. And I want the workers to truly understand that until Delta truly respect the workers and what we do and what we bring to the table, we're going to always be at the bottom. And this is the most disrespectful thing that Delta can do to us. We're the number one leading airline in the industry. And we should have number one leading pay, number one leading benefits. No one at Delta Airlines, whether you seasonal, whether you full-time, part-time, you should have a seat at the table. You should have great benefits and great pay. So I just wanted to throw that into the workers because sometimes we forget to see that we do a lot. Delta executives get to take the credit for everything that we do. They are not doing this work. We're doing this work. The workers are out here doing the work. The workers are out here making sure those planes are out on time. So I want the workers to understand that don't keep cheating ourselves with these little bitty, itty bitty raises that Delta decides that this is what we're worth. If you think you're only worth 4%, then this is going to work for you. But I'm sure that we're worth more than 4%. We're worth more than 5%. We're worth so much that Delta does not want to recognize. So I'll also let Stedman talk about this as a Delta worker, Earl as a Delta worker, and Kip also noticed as a retiree. So we got to get up and start being more of a voice. We got to vote for a union. You got to sign a union card. We have to get the union on the property in order for us to have a seat at the table and have more decision makers over our raise, over our benefits, over our livelihoods. We have families, we have kids, we have necessities that need to be met, and 4% just ain't gonna do it. So I just want the workers to understand what these guys are saying to you as a whole. We deserve better. This is disrespectful of Delta to treat employees. Have anything you want to add to that? Because this is disrespect at its ultimate.
If I could chime in real quick, I ain't trying to be long-winded with this. This is a prime example. It's been years since the merger. And the insurance premiums go up. Where's the raise at? Where's the raise at? I've never seen that when, we had a union on the property of Northwest. See, all that is negotiated collectively. It's every single time you get a raise, insurance premiums will go up. Same thing with vacations. Other airlines have 6 to 7 weeks. We're still staggering, what is that, 5 weeks? The leading airline, we should set the bar. The employees of America United should be sitting back and saying, damn, Delta's really treating their employees correct. That got top tier, the lead industry, but they're not. And the employees are the ones that's busting their backs, going to work, working double shifts, swaps, whatever you want to call it, to make this company where it is today. And as far as the respect factor, the company's not giving us that right.
Wow, that was great, Earl. That was great. Stedman, do you have anything you want to say? Because we're coming into a wrap up here.
Yeah, so really I wanted to hit on what you said and definitely what Brother Earl just said, but the way I had to think about it was, would second be good enough for Delta? Would among the pack be good enough for Delta if we went to the CEO, if we went to the board and said, hey, we're among the pack of airlines in on-time performance, on bags to claim, on customer satisfaction, on baggage or customer retention or whatever. We're among the pack, right? We're not number one, but we're not number four. We're among the pack. Would that be good enough? And I can assure that answer would be no. It would not be good enough. We see it every day when they add some new stipulation or new process to the job, or they find some cost cutting or cost saving measure, that the answer is no. That's not good enough, right? When they tell you to do something in the name of safety, and when you do it, they give you a hard time about it. The answer is no. So why, for us employees, for those of us, like Brother Earl said, who break our backs, who do the work, who stand out in the rain and in the cold and in the heat, who during the pandemic, we were on the front line, right? We were on the front line dealing with that before anyone knew what was going on. We were the front line of exposure back in, what was it, 2013, 2012 with Ebola. We had to deal with that. I remember working in Atlanta at that time, and we did not know what was going on. We were bringing passengers back and all that. We didn't know how this would proceed and how it would spread throughout the country. But we were on the front line of that. We were heroes and essential workers during the pandemic. And so we need to be compensated and above and beyond, because not only do we perform in those situations, in the rain, in the cold, in the heat, and whatever is going on internally, but even among our peers, we perform better, right? So we don't want to be among the pack of airlines. We want to be number one, just as Ed Bastian wants Delta to be number one. We want to be number one in compensation and benefits. We want to be able to, like Brother Earl said, we want the other airlines to say, man, Delta really takes care of their people. And it appears that without a contract, that is not going to happen.
Yes.
We can get out of this fantasy, that they'll just come and realize how valuable we are. They are not. And so we got to get over it. So I let, Brother Kip say his piece, and I'll land myself there.
So Kip, our veteran, our veteran of this drive, who has been doing this tireless for years, who is the brain that keeps us functioning, who is the heart that keeps us beating. I would like for you to give us a nice wrap up on talking to the workers and why we need a union at Delta Airlines.
Well, I just saw a flyer, a leaflet that Delta put out. Apparently, we're hitting a nerve with what we're saying about the fact that Delta is not an industry leader in any category except for profit sharing. So this leaflet sort of picks and chooses what they're going to look at to determine that, oh, yes, in fact, you Delta workers, we're treating you the best. Now, the problem is that they're cherry picking what they want to look at. They are not including, and these are things that mean cold, hard cash to you. Things like, if you don't, at United, if you don't get a lunch between your third and fifth hour, you get an extra half-hour pay. If you don't get a lunch at all, you get an hour's pay. That adds up over the course of the year. I know I used to get $2,000 or so a year in off-scheduled lunches. If you work 10 minutes past the end of your shift, you get a full hour's pay, and then you get to go home. That's worth cold hard cash. things like better insurance with a lower deductible and lower premiums, cold hard cash, sick time. You don't have it. You have PPT time, but you don't have sick time. You don't have OJI time. And at United, you have those things, which if you get sick, you don't have to come into work when you're sick because you know you'll get paid. You don't have, I mean, I know when we lost our OJI time that I would come into work and work hurt because I couldn't afford to go out and get only 60% of my check and no pay for the first week. So I would come in and work hurt. And I know there's many, many Delta workers that do exactly the same thing. That's worth cold, hard cash. So if you add all these things up, and that's not even including things like a grievance procedure, so that an OSM can't just come along and jam you up. So you're suspended. You'll hear from HR in 3 months, and HR, guess what? Oh, surprise, you're fired, or you could resign. Things like that, or a safety committee that can say, you know what, that belt loader that's been causing you all sorts of problems, we're pulling it out of service so that you don't have to work with it. A union safety committee. Having a shop committee, which is like the union group that can go to the company and say, what do you mean you're not going to staff up anymore? And have that argument with them and argue and fight and win more staffing, better equipment. If you add all those things up, not only is it cold, hard cash, but it adds up to one simple thing that you are not getting right now, which is dignity, respect, those two words. So what we need now is we need people that are fired up enough so that they're willing to help collect cards. That's the biggest thing we need. If you're listening to this and you're nodding your head, us talk, um, then please get in touch with us. We're on Delta Workers Unite Facebook page. You can message me. I'm on Facebook, and we'll get you cards. We'll tell you how to do it so you don't get in trouble, because you do have legal rights to advocate for a union. So I will stop there.
All right, all right. Did anyone on the panel have anything else to say as we come to a wrap up? Brother Earl, our other veteran, did you have anything you want to say? And we're going to wrap it up. It's been a great podcast.
One quick thing real quick, I'm gonna try to shorten it. If you look at all these platforms Delta has, Fit Team, what's that? Safety Advocates. Okay, if you look at these platforms the company has, which the employees' voices are supposed to be shadowed through those platforms, then why is it that here I am working the ramp, and then now I have to go behind the engine to chock the wheel of an aircraft? I was always trained you stay away from the back of the aircraft, but yet you have a fit team, you have safety advocates that supposed to be your voice. Nothing's been changed. Look at the bump caps. We're going to the hot season. We've been dealing with these bump caps for a couple of years now. No type of accommodations. Nothing has been done for the employees to accommodate the heat these bump caps produce. All these tests, employees across the system have put thermostats inside these bump caps to show how hot it is when you're wearing it, but yet the company still has not done anything to rectify the problem. Where's the voice? But yet all these platforms are here, so supposedly the employees can shadow their voices through those platforms. We need a voice at the table. We need cards collected so we can get to an election and have our voices heard and have the dignity and respect we deserve for all the profits and revenue we make for this company. Because currently we don't have that. That's my closing.
Thank you so much, Earl. Statman, can we give everybody a hand clap for today's show? So as always, Statman, did you have something you want to Did you have something you want to say before we wrap it up?
No, just another great show. I'm glad we could have our guests and figure out our timing and everything. It was a great informative show. I appreciate you two really making it work for us for this podcast and for the drive and for everybody who's going to use this information to help them make a decision to join the drive, to join the union, to support the movement, and to get involved.
All right, all right. Well, thanks everybody. And please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification button to see all uploads when they're uploaded. And don't forget to write your comments, email us if you have something you want to say. We thank you for joining us today. We thank our fabulous panel today, and we will see you next week on the next podcast. So thank you and have a great evening, everyone. We'll see you. Union Strong.
Peace.
Peace.
Well, that was the part 2. So I think that was a very informative show. I hope you found it useful as part 1 and with the information, but it was a lot to talk about, really understanding that you spend $1 billion on stock buybacks and how that influences stock price and how that looks good for investors and things like that. And then when you get and look at spending $330 million to invest in WestJet, when you say you can't afford to give us a greater profit sharing, right? And again, the numbers that I said when I was talking about our raise, 10%. Just looking at inflation and cost of living increases and all of that. It wasn't even, that was a minimum. And they spent more than the minimums in stock buybacks. They spent more than the minimum that I thought we should be looking at in stock buybacks. And even though I say the minimum, I think most workers would be happy with a 10% increase. When you look at, anyone's job. So I don't think that I'm saying we deserve something that is outlandish, because we all do our jobs, as we said in the video. We all do things that make this company profitable. It's not a one-person show. It is all of us workers, all 20,000 on the ground, ramp, tower, and cargo, who stand out in the rain and in the heat and the snow and, whatever may be, who have bad knees and bad backs and bad shoulders and hurt all over when you walk. Those are the sacrifices we made to make Delta what it is, to put it in the number 1 position. And we deserve to be compensated for that. It's not a handout. We're not asking for something because we don't contribute. It's just equal and just fair compensation. So I don't have any comments, like questions to address. It looks like I left one up, but there are none, no comments. I do have a couple that I liked from Stand with Yvette. The folks in the C-suite make sure they get more than 4%, and that's for sure. We got Brianna Claybrooks. That's ridiculous, and it was. I think that was when Kip was breaking down the pay. Yvette again, these types of financial moves should be criminal. Workers make you all the profits, and you reward yourselves and shareholders. And that's again talking about the stock buybacks, which really, like I said in the clip or the pre-record, getting into stock buybacks and that whole process could be a complete show by itself. It's really convoluted when you understand how all that works together. But it hurts workers. To put it shortly, worker productivity or efficiency has been decoupled from our pay. So the more efficiently we work as workers, no matter what industry you're in, if you're a worker, your pay does not necessarily, in most cases, it doesn't. If you are, a laborer, your pay does not increase in a proportionate way to your productivity or your efficiency or anything like that. That was decoupled. That used to be the way it worked, when you were profitable and you were compensated in a proportionate way. But these are the things as working people we have to advocate for ourselves. We have to understand this, that we deserve this. It's not it's not being ungrateful. If you didn't come to work, you wouldn't get here. If you didn't come to work, you wouldn't have a job, right? If you didn't do what you were supposed to do when you were at work, you would be let go. So everybody who's employed anywhere, wherever you are, and especially if you've managed to stay employed for a period of time, understand that is because you have put in the effort to do what you are obligated to do. And for that, you deserve to be compensated. So I'll close out. As I said, no more comments to address. So thanks for tuning in with us. If you have questions, let me see, give me 1 second. I just want to try to set some things up. Okay. And so thanks us if you have questions that were not answered, or maybe a specific topic you'd like to have addressed, leave us a comment and we will get back to you. Also, all available links to information and materials are posted in the description. If you have any comments about what we presented in this, our opinions about how workers should be dignified in what they do, leave a comment. We'll try our best to get back to you with the response that's thoughtful and informative. But send an email if you'd like to join the show. As you see, we have started to do more pre-recorded shows because we understand people have schedules that don't necessarily allow for them to be here live at 6 o'clock on a Monday. So if you have a specific perspective you'd like to share with your work, maybe you have another job that is unionized and you'd like to share that perspective with us and with all the viewers and Delta workers who are trying to organize, feel free to drop us an email. Remember, this podcast is powered by working people just like you. In solidarity, peace.